Welcome to Late Night with Lenin. There is a Lenin statue right behind me, but my chair is covering it, so I don't know what to do. So hopefully we can get a lot more people here. Please send it to your friends, family, enemies. Tweet this out, share it on Facebook. We'll wait for a few minutes to get more people in. Also, guess what? We have super chats, so feel free to use the super chat to donate to this. We really need the money. And today we're gonna have a really good guest, Jackson Hinkle from The Dive. So Jackson recently debated with Wash, who is a what's a good word? Never. Who's mostly a gamer who tries to LARP in politics, maybe. And Jackson debated on the question of the chemical weapons in Duma, Syria. So, this is very exciting for me to have an interview with Jackson. And I guess there is a big protest in Cuba that's been kind of astroturfed because Alan McLeod from Mint Press News actually did a count of all the public pictures of showing the quote unquote anti-government protest. And they said thousands, but he counted only 175 people. So my guess is that it's not very intricate. The word is moron, according to Ogbog for Vosh. Sure, why not? And let's see, is there anything else? Oh yeah, Biden came out with his senile anti-communist rant, but I was surprised that he actually referred to Angela Merkel by her name and not he didn't call her Margaret Thatcher, which is a big plus for Biden. Is there anything else that I forgot? Oh, I'm back on TikTok. Oh, thank you so much, Thank you so much, Arlen Everest. This is so sweet. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the super chat. And what was I saying? Oh, I was saying that I totally forgot what I was talking. Oh, I'm back on TikTok. Oh yeah, I was banned for 2 weeks because I said I showed a video of the Catholic Church collaborating with the Ustazi in Croatia, and TikTok banned me for 2 weeks for this. But they did say that I was promoting a dangerous, hateful ideology and dangerous, hateful people, which does include the Ustazi in the Catholic Church. So it's not entirely wrong. Hello, Nadia Yvette Chambers. Thank you for coming. We love having you here. Let's see. One thing is that we get a lot of nuanced cucks, including like Senator Chris Murphy, who's like, oh, two things can be true. It can be that US sanctions are bad and people in Cuba are protesting their government. No, two things can't be true because that just means you're lazy and you're not actually figuring out if it happened. Hello, LME, yo. So when somebody says can, it always means that they have not taken they're saying it is possible in the universe of plausibilities. They're not saying, I actually went in and did this research and found out that these people are actually protesting the Cuban government and these people are not gusanos or whatever it is. So never trust anyone who says can happen because, yes, a lot of things are physically possible within the realm of this universe. It just means they're too lazy to figure out if it did happen. I believe George W. Bush was trending because he made a weird comment about Afghanistan. I just wanted to remind you that the Taliban agreed to turn in Osama bin Laden if George W. Bush provided proof that Osama bin Laden was behind 9/11, and then also they asked if they could turn him into a neutral third party. Anyways, hope you enjoy our very interesting piece because Lenin explains what is required of an actual revolution and what is a fake color revolution. So with that, enjoy our pre-recorded interview and we'll be back at the end for questions, comments, gossip, nonsense, whatever else you guys want. Please share with your friends, family, Reddit, whatever. We need it. And hit the like, subscribe, and also go to historically.substack.com/subscribe.
Yeah. Today, we have host of The Dive, Jackson Hinkle. Did I pronounce your last name right?
You did.
Okay, Jackson Hinkle. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I was very impressed that you ran for city council of San Clemente when you were 19 or 20. Is that right?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I lived here my whole life. So it was a cool experience to be able to do that.
And I also saw some hit pieces from the far right where they called you like full blown communist and all sort of weird things. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are they? Like,
yeah. I was like a little social democrat back then. You know, I got my DSA endorsement running in the race, and this is a very, very, very conservative town. I think it's probably the most conservative town in Orange County, California, which is a conservative county. And yeah, you could imagine the smear tactics that were used against me by like the right wing and by the sheriff's department here. It was a whole scene.
I was reading the one where you got some firefighters endorsement and then they accused you of abusing it. I'm like, how?
Yeah, that was one of the funniest and most like it was probably one of the most ridiculous ones. But that actually ended up being one of the biggest like smear jobs of the whole campaign, because it was such like an incredible thing for the firefighters to endorse like a 19-year-old running for office. And it was a really big endorsement. So they tried to go after it really hard. And it was hilarious. The whole thing was funny.
Okay. So when did you start your YouTube show, The Dive, which I really love because you actually focus on being anti-imperialistic. And that's one of our entire goals of Historically.
Yeah, and that's why I appreciate a lot of the work that you all do. And I started the YouTube show in February of 2020, so I haven't been doing it for that long. I started live streaming just around the end of the presidential election. So like, I think it was in the final days of the election, actually, I got enough equipment to be able to live stream. And since then, I've been live streaming almost every day, and I love doing it. And I love, prioritizing the focus of leftist commentary, but also, as you said, rooting that in anti-imperialism.
Yeah, well, for me, I really like, I'm just going to be, a lot of people who are American, as in who just grew up in America, are very bad at kind of understanding like how the media confuses them. And so you've actually done a great job of figuring out the color revolutions, the coups, not just the smear jobs. Like what helped you?
Yeah, I'll first say that it's still a learning experience, or an unlearning experience rather. Trying to just educate myself about the lived experiences of people in other countries, rather than apply my Western education and what I've been propagandized with onto them. And that's come through listening to people who are living in countries like Syria, like listening to Richard Medhurst actually was one of the initial voices that really, really catapulted my interest in anti-imperialism. And Rania Khalek also is someone who I've listened a lot to that's kind of shifted my focus towards anti-imperialism. And listening to a lot of the people that the Gray Zone has brought onto their streams and the primary sources that they've been able to interview in long form streams on their platforms as well. So I think by and large, it's just listening to people who are actually in these countries debunking the Western myths and about their countries or their leaders or what's happening there. And through my platform, my show, my Twitter, just trying to educate my other Western, listeners or followers about what's really going on in each of these countries.
Okay. I hate to, now that you brought up Syria, I hate to bring up that name, but for some odd reason, it gets a lot of viewers. Like it has like 360,000 followers or something on YouTube. Mm-hmm. So I did catch quite a bit of your debate with Vosh, and what I've like checked 2 debates with them, yours and Mel's, and what you did that I love Mel. She is awesome. But that she didn't do is that you kept the focus on the data. You're like, okay, so now why do you think the helicopters dropped the, what do you call it, containers? Yeah. Like he kept on thinking, why do I feel like I'm arguing with a Nazi? Whatever he said, you kept on back to, like, you were like, okay, nice job, back to the facts, and he couldn't deal with it. So like, how did you do that?
Well, you were someone who initially I was talking to early on when I found out that this debate was actually going to happen. And you're like, look, like, you got to stay focused on the facts, because he's going to try to obfuscate and, level these smears against you and try to do anything and everything but actually talk about the facts, which overwhelmingly align in your favor, the side of the argument that you're trying to put forward. So that was really good advice, because that's exactly what happened. I mean, he was calling me anything and everything that came to his mind. I mean, I think there were probably 10 plus times where he said that I was either like a neo-Nazi or my arguments were characteristic of neo-Nazis and conspiracy theorists, when in fact, the things that he was espousing in that debate, trying to concoct like ridiculous reasons as to why the investigators on the ground were wrong. He's the one who was acting like a conspiracy theorist. He was the one who was avoiding the facts of the situation. And just staying focused on the facts and what the investigations have shown us, and also what they haven't shown us, right? Was exactly what needed to be done in that debate. And I think it resonated with a lot of people who are watching it, because even a lot of people who are detractors of mine or don't necessarily support everything that I do or say, were like, you kind of obliterated him in that debate because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I like I said, I tried watching. I watched 2 separate clips of like 5 minutes each, but then it got like, I was like, oh my God, I can't. He's so stupid. Like, and I try not to give him attention, but then he says something horrible, stupid, ahistorical, and he has thousands of followers, and I'm like, oh Lord, how did the Lord let us get into this kind of mess?
Yeah, and that's the problem that I saw with it all, was like, I did see some people who have been, actually doing real journalism on Syria and the OPCW cover up, saying things like, why should I care what someone like Vosh has to say about Syria? In reality, you shouldn't care about what he says about Syria. But the only reason why it's important to, I guess, try to hold him accountable and try to, in my case, debate him, is because he was streaming for hours and hours and hours in front of his 360,000 member audience and telling just like bald-faced lies about what's going on in Syria. So
everywhere, everything. Yeah. I mean, he got the basic history of Korea wrong. Like the U.S. invaded. It was like the Korean people in 1945. This is all New York Times stuff. Like 1945 decided to form one government. U.S. invaded, split them. Blah blah blah. Like he completely like it. Regardless of what it is, he gets it wrong. Oh God, the worst has to be.
Yep.
Would Lenin vote for Biden? And I'm like,
that's the worst.
Jesus Christ! If you cannot imagine Lenin storming the White House with a revolution, you're like not even a leftist. Like, but thank God Hakeem took that one, because that was like, so he all he did was Google like five random quotes from Lenin, totally out of context, and it's like, that's all you do, man.
Yep. And I think probably someone else even could have prepared those quotes for him. I mean, like it didn't. He doesn't do a lot of his own research, and I think he relies on other people to make his really shaky claims or fraudulent claims, and that's what we saw in this debate as well. The night before we actually had the debate, he was on his live stream prepping for our debate. And he accidentally opened up his live or his Twitter direct messages, and he was DMing people like Patrick Hillsman and Francesca Fiorentini, who've worked with the Young Turks and claim to be experts on Syria, but have never really produced
Al Jazeera.
Yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It's Al Jazeera in English is okay, but in their Arabic channel, it's very dog whistly and extremely bigoted against Shias. Like you can't just, there's no, like, so it's kind of like trusting somebody like on Fox News about racism or something, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt.
You also did a really good one against the coup attempt. And this was the coup attempt in Venezuela, like, which I really liked because you just broke it down into the most simplest terms. So that was really good. And yeah, this is what I really, like I said, it's hard I get very happy when I see people in America who kind of just get it. And so the first piece we will read, you might like this one. It is called, okay, so we'll just go to the, Marxist section 1, which is basically this was during World War I, and all the parties had agreed that all the Marxist parties had agreed that they would not vote for World War I credits, but then the French and the German and the British backstabbed everyone and helped create World War I. And Lenin kind of explains why this is bad.
Yep.
Okay. So this should be the defense of the fatherland is just like, so if you can start with like section 1, that would be great. Or you can start with the preamble. It's up to you, whatever.
Totally. Okay, cool. Should I start at the Kievsky?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So Kievsky is somebody who is basically saying that World War I is okay. Well, it's okay for proletariat to defend their fatherlands. And Lenin's like, no, this is a war of imperialism. This is meant to divide the world. This is not okay. So
cool. So section 1, Marxist attitude towards war and defense of the fatherland. Mm-hmm. Kievsky is convinced and wants to convince his reader that he disagrees only with section 9 of our party program dealing with national self-determination. Do you want to stop and go through it?
I'll stop whenever it's important. You'll see.
Okay, cool.
Just continue to read and then you'll see.
He is very angry and tries to refute the charge that on the question of democracy, he is departing from the fundamentals of Marxism in general, that he has betrayed, the angry quotation marks are Kievsky's, Marxism on basic issues. But the point is that the moment our author begins to discuss his allegedly partial disagreement on an individual issue, the moment he adduces his argument, considerations, etc., he immediately reveals that he is deviating from Marxism all along the line. Take section B, section 2 of his article, quote, this demand, i.e. national self-determination, directly leads to social patriotism. Our author proclaims, explaining that the treasonous slogan of fatherland defense follows, quote, quite logically from the right of nations to self-determination.
Okay, so basically, everyone knows that Britain, France, Germany, I'm forgetting some other country, Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, when they were in America later, but when they're fighting World War I, they're not really fighting to defend their fatherland, but instead Britain wants Germany's colonies and Germany wants Britain's colonies so that they can extract more and more resources. So Lenin thinks this is immoral. But Lenin has also in the 1915 program talked about how colonies like India, places in Africa have the right to self-determination, which is like the right to be free from the colonizers. And this guy is twisting the idea of self-determination for the colonies to mean, I guess, self-determination for the colonizers, which Lenin is saying this is BS.
Doing a good job of pointing it out. He goes on to write, in his opinion, self-determination implies, quote, sanctioning the treason of the French and Belgian social patriots who are defending this independence, the nation independence of France and Belgium, with arms in hand. They are doing what the supporters of self-determination only advocate. Quote, defense of the fatherland belongs to the arsenal of our worst enemies. Quote, we categorically refuse to understand how one can simultaneously be against defense of the fatherland and for self-determination against the fatherland and for it. Mm-hmm. That's Kievsky. He obviously has not understood our resolutions against the fatherland defense slogan in the present war. It is therefore necessary again to explain the meaning of what is so clearly set out in our resolutions. The resolution our party adopted at its Bern conference in March 1915 on the defense of the fatherland slogan begins with the words, the present war in substance, and then that the resolution deals with the present war could not have been put more plainly. The words in substance indicate that we must distinguish between the apparent and the real, between appearance and substance, between the word and the deed. The purpose of all talk about defense of the fatherland in this war is mendaciously to present as national the imperialist war of 1914 to 16, waged for the division of colonies, the plunder of foreign lands, etc., and to obviate even the slightest possibility of distorting our views, we added to the resolution a special paragraph on, quote, genuinely national wars, which, quote, took place especially does not mean exclusively, between 1789 and 1871.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me, I picked this because this a little bit reminds me of like how Vosh was word parsing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it was just as ridiculous. Like his like, he wanted you to hypothetically entertain some random helicopter, which may or may not have come. And I'm like, what's going on?
No, it's a very similar thing. It's a very similar thing. And it's like also trying to like pigeonhole someone into their language while mischaracterizing their language, you know?
Yep.
So it goes on to write here, the resolution explains that the basis of these genuinely national wars was a, quote, long process of mass national movements of a struggle against absolutism and feudalism, the overthrow of national oppression. Clear, it would seem. The present imperialist war stems from the general conditions of the imperialist era and is not accidental, not an exception, and not a deviation from the general and typical. Talk of defense of the fatherland is therefore a deception of the people, for this war is not a national war. And a genuinely national war, the words defense of the fatherland are not a deception. We are not opposed to it. Such genuinely national wars took place especially in 1789 to 1871, and our resolution, while not denying by a single word that they are possible now too, explains how we should distinguish a genuinely national from an imperialist war covered by deceptive national slogans. Specifically, in order to distinguish the two, we must examine whether the basis of the war is a, quote, long process of mass national movements, the, quote, overthrow of national oppression. The resolution on pacifism expressly states, quote, social democrats cannot overlook the positive significance of revolutionary wars, i.e. not imperialist wars, but such as were conducted, for instance, between 1789 and 1871 with the aim of doing away with national oppression. Could our 1915 party resolution speak of the national wars waged from 1789 to 1871 and say that we do not deny the positive significance of such wars if they were not considered possible today too? Certainly not. A commentary or popular explanation of our party resolutions is given in the Lenin and Zinoviev pamphlet, Socialism and War, it plainly states on page 5 that, quote, socialists have regarded wars for the defense of the fatherland, or, quote, defensive wars, as legitimate, progressive, and just, only in the sense of, quote, overthrowing alien oppression. It cites an example, Persia against Russia, etc., and says these would be just and defensive wars, irrespective of who would lie the first to attack. Any socialist would wish the oppressed, dependent, and unequal states victory over the oppressor, slaveholding, and predatory great powers. Mm-hmm. The pamphlet appeared in August 1915, and there are German and French translations. Kievsky is fully aware of its contents, and never, on no occasion, has he or anyone else challenged the resolution on the defense of the fatherland slogan, or the resolution on pacifism, or their interpretation in the pamphlet. Never, not once. We are therefore entitled to ask, are we slandering Kievsky when we say that he has absolutely failed to understand Marxism, if beginning with March 1915, he has not challenged our party's views on the war, whereas now, in August 1916, in an article on self-determination, i.e. on supposedly partial issue, he reveals an amazing lack of understanding of a general issue. Kievsky says that the fatherland defense slogan is treasonous. We can confidently assure him that every slogan is and always will be treasonous. For those who mechanically repeat it without understanding its meaning, without giving it proper thought, for those who merely memorize the words without analyzing their implications.
Actually, this is how I feel about so many people who have these caricatures where they're like, oh, you can support both things. You can be against Assad and you can be against, I don't know, al-Nusra or whoever is on the other side. Yeah. And it's like, no. Both things cannot be true, because it's like if one goes, the other, there's only one other group that has an army to swoop in there. There's no middle ground there. Whoever has the army gets to swoop in, and exactly. They don't seem to get that. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's like, so many people will just try to erase from history the brutal acts of the Al-Qaeda militants in Syria, and just act like there's only one side to it. So,
you mentioned some. Can you? And I was not very familiar, but so you said what was the group that was Saudi backed that was in Duma that was doing really horrible stuff? Can you just quickly mention that, because I didn't know about that.
Yeah, so that group is called Jaish al-Islam, and they are this Saudi-backed sectarian extremist group, and they had control over Duma in Eastern Ghouta since 2012, and they were committing, gross acts of violence, crimes against humanity against the civilians who lived in that region. And the stuff included taking prisoners of dissidents of Jaish al-Islam and putting them in cages and parading them around the town of Duma. Really disgusting things. But again, for as much as people like Vosh or other imperialists talk about their grievances with Assad's crimes that took place, years and years and years and years ago at the start of this revolution, or this manufactured revolution. They never talk about the crimes of these Al-Qaeda rebranded groups like Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or like Jaish al-Islam. It's just so transparent. It's so transparent.
Yeah, that's exactly they. Like I said, they often say, "Oh my God, he's a war criminal," and then they never ever, or even what about the NATO people, like the US, France, and UK? They keep bombing at so many things, and they also have disgusting sanctions where they can't import medicine and food and things like that. So it's they are, often it's like they don't seem to understand that there's a whole other side that the news won't cover, but it's not hard to uncover because a lot of this is just out in the open. You just have to take some time.
Of course. Yeah. And then the last thing I'll say to that is also, you can recognize that Assad has done terrible things in the past, but in what context, right? When you look at what NATO allied countries are doing. They're waging wars in sovereign nations and committing war crimes, not in their country, but in other countries to steal their resources and commit regime change abroad. What Assad is doing is fighting a war against, again, these terrorists.
Literally for the defense of the fatherland in the good sense.
Yes, in his own country.
Yeah.
All right, so let's continue on. So we're at right here. What, generally speaking, is defense of the fatherland? Is it a scientific concept relating to economics, politics, etc.? No, it is a much bandied. It is a much bandied about current expression, sometimes simply a Philistine phrase intended to justify the war, nothing more, absolutely nothing. The term treasonous can apply only in the sense of that the Philistine is capable of justifying any war by pleading, well, we are defending our fatherland. Whereas Marxism, which does not degrade itself by stooping to the Philistines' level, requires an historical analysis of each war in order to determine whether or not that particular war can be considered progressive, whether it serves the interests of democracy and the proletariat, and in that sense is legitimate and just.
Exactly. And I don't see enough anyone doing that. Like, there are so many clips where people are just like, okay, we'll just go in and support bombing Libya because it looks like, but what they don't understand is every war propaganda has some atrocity propaganda that may or may not be true. And then, instead, like, they don't understand the historical context of like, what was there? What resources do they have? And so, yeah, I really think, by the way, if your favorite YouTuber or progressive is imperialist, like, please, like, start here and send them a clip of the rest so that they can understand how to analyze future wars.
Yeah, this is a really good, really good piece that you brought for today. So the defense of the fatherland slogan is all too often unconscious Philistine justification of war and reveals inability to analyze the meaning and implications of a particular war and see it in historical perspective. Marxism makes that analysis and says, if the substance of a war, for example, the overthrow of an alien oppression, which was especially typical of Europe in 1789 to 1871, then such a war is progressive as far as the oppressed state or nation is concerned. If, however, the substance of a war is redivision of colonies, division of booty, plunder of foreign lands, and such is the war of 1914 to 16.
And every war after.
Then all talk of defending the fatherland is sheer deception of the people. How then can we disclose and define the substance of a war? War is the continuation of policy. Consequently, we must examine the policy pursued prior to the war, the policy that led to and brought about the war.
Hold on 1 second. Janet, can you make a 1, 2, 3 list on the bottom for people in the future to figure out how to analyze a war? So the first one, you'll see. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Cool. If it was an imperialist policy, i.e. one designed to safeguard the interests of finance capital and rob and oppress colonies in foreign countries, then the war stemming from that policy is imperialist. If it was a national liberation policy, i.e. one expressive of the mass movement against national oppression, then the war stemming from that policy is a war of national liberation. The Philistine does not realize that war is the continuation of policy and consequently limits himself to the formula that the enemy has attacked us. The enemy has invaded my country without stopping to think what issues are at stake in the war, which classes are waging it, and what political objects. Kievsky stoops right down to the level of such a Philistine when he declares that Belgium has been occupied by the Germans, and hence, from the point of view of self-determination, the Belgian social patriots are right, or the Germans have occupied part of France, hence Giesty can be satisfied for, quote, what is involved is territory populated by his nation and not by an alien nation. For the Philistine, the important thing is where the army stand, who is winning at the moment. For the Marxist, the important thing is what issues are at stake in this war, during which first one, then the other army may be on top. What is the present war being fought over? The answer is given in our resolution. Based on the policy, the belligerent powers pursued for decades prior to the war, England, France, and Russia are fighting to keep the colonies they have seized. To be able to rob Turkey, etc., Germany is fighting to take over these colonies and to be able herself to rob Turkey, etc.
But the funny thing is that Syria, Iraq, everything was part of the Ottoman Empire. So even today, the wars are still fought over the ability to be able to rob Turkey.
Honestly, history repeats itself. Right?
Has not stopped.
Yeah, no, that's a better characterization. Of it. Yeah. They go on to write, let us suppose even that Germans take Paris or St. Petersburg. Would that change the nature of the present war? Not at all. The Germans' purpose, and more important, the policy that would bring it to the realization if they were to win, is to seize the colonies, establish domination over Turkey, annex areas populated by other nations, for instance, Poland, etc. It is definitely not to bring the French or the Russians under foreign domination. The real essence of the present war is not national, but imperialist. In other words, it is not being fought to enable one side to overthrow national oppression, which the other side is trying to maintain. It is a war between two groups of oppressors, between two freebooters over the division of their booty, over who shall rob Turkey and the colonies.
And that's still the current Syrian war to be.
No kidding.
Because I mean, back then Turkey was like covered like all of the Middle East. Okay.
In short, a war between imperialist great powers, i.e. powers that oppress a whole number of nations and enmesh them in dependence on finance capital or an alliance with the great powers, is an imperialist war, such as the War of 1914-16. And in this war, defense of the fatherland is a deception, an attempt to justify the war. A war against imperialists, i.e. oppressing powers by oppress, for example, colonial nations, is a genuine national war. It is possible today, too. Defense of the fatherland in a war waged by an oppressed nation against a foreign oppressor is not a deception. Socialists are not opposed to defense of the fatherland in such a war. National self-determination is the same as the struggle for complete national liberation, for complete independence against annexation. And socialists cannot, without ceasing to be socialists, reject such a struggle in whatever form, right down to an uprising or war. Kievsky thinks he is arguing against Plekhanov. It was Plekhanov who pointed to the link between self-determination and defense of the fatherland. Kievsky believed Plekhanov that the link was really of the kind Plekhanov made it out to be. And having believed him, Kievsky took fright and decided that he must reject self-determination so as not to fall into Plekhanov's conclusions. There is great trust in Plekhanov and great fright, but there's no trace of thought about the substance of Plekhanov's mistake. The social chauvinists plead self-determination in order to present this war as a national war. There's only one correct way of combating them. We must show that the war is being fought not to liberate nations, but to determine which of the great robbers will oppress more nations. To fall into negation of wars really waged for liberating nations is to prevent the worst possible caricature of Marxism. Plekhanov and the French social chauvinists harp on the Republic in France in order to justify its defense against the German monarchy. If we were to follow Kievsky's line of reasoning, we would have to oppose either the Republic or a war really fought to preserve the Republic. The German social chauvinists point to universal suffrage and compulsory primary education in their country to justify its defense against Tsarism. If we were to follow Kievsky's line of reasoning, we would have to oppose either universal suffrage and compulsory primary education or a war really fought to safeguard political freedom against attempts to abolish it. Up to the 1914-16 war, Karl Kautsky was a Marxist, and many of his major writings and statements will always remain models of Marxism. On August 26, 1910, he wrote Die Neue Zeit in reference to the imminent war. Quote, in a war between Germany and England, the issue is not democracy, but world domination, i.e. exploitation of the world. That is not an issue on which social democrats can side with the exploiters of their nation.
Correct. That is something we should repeat. That is not the issue on which social democrats can side with the exploiters of their nation. Okay.
Yeah, that was a good line.
Yeah.
There you have an excellent Marxist formulation, one that fully coincides with our own and fully exposes the present day Kautsky, who has turned from Marxism to defense of social chauvinism. It is a formulation we shall have occasion to revert to in other articles that clearly brings out the principles underlying the Marxist attitudes towards war. War is the continuation of policy. Hence, once there is a struggle for democracy, a war for democracy is possible. National self-determination is but one of the democratic demands and does not in principle differ from other democratic demands. World domination is, to put it briefly, the substance of imperialist policy, of which imperialist war is the continuation. Rejection of defense of the fatherland in a democratic war, i.e. rejecting participation in such a war, is an absurdity that has nothing in common with Marxism. To embellish imperialist war by applying to it the concept of defense of the fatherland, i.e. by presenting it as a democratic war, is to deceive the workers and side with the reactionary bourgeoisie.
Yep. For me, I'd like to hear your thoughts about this, but for me, like often people have this like fear of like atrocities, like, oh, what if there's a atrocity? And it's like, if there are atrocities, I bet you the US would not be against it. Like they don't seem to kind of understand the propaganda of atrocity porn versus reality. Do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, I mean, that it kind of actually goes back to what we were referring to earlier. Like you have a lot of these imperialist political commentators today, be it on like the boutique left or especially in mainstream media, cable media, who, you know, cry these crocodile tears about country X or country Y, you know, allegedly committing an atrocity that was responsible for maybe 30, 40 deaths. And for that reason, they feel as though it's, you know, justified to wage an intervention or some sort of economic warfare. What they're leaving out, though, is the far more important atrocities that in you know, large scale mass atrocities that are being committed by our own nation and nations that we are funding or supporting. You know, you can look exactly at what we were referring to earlier with what's taken place in Syria. The U.S. bombed Syria over 100 times with the UK and France in response to the allegation that Assad had committed a chemical attack that resulted in 49 people's deaths. Meanwhile, the United States is also, you know, participating in a Saudi-U.S. naval blockade in Yemen, which is going to result in over 400,000 child deaths below the age of 16 over the next 12 months if they continue it. So there's this incredible ability for so many who are imperialists to their core to again, erase the mass atrocities that are being committed with their own dollar by their own leaders that they themselves elected and encouraged other people, their own followers, to elect. But then when it comes to like the allegation of a much smaller atrocity, they labeled that as the thing that we should all be concerned with. Not what our people, not what we're doing, but, you know, what people in their own country are doing in an effort to combat a insurrection that was being, you know, manufactured by the United States and other imperialist actors.
Yeah, like one thing, like throughout history, I've noticed is, like I'm still like working on this project, and it's taking extra long time. Where I just follow, I'm just like following what New York Times wrote about Mussolini from 1922 to like far too late in the 1940s, where they should not have been writing such stuff about Mussolini and Hitler. And what people don't realize is that they actually called so what happens is that if it's a crime committed by somebody in power, it's like minimized. And if it's like a little bit of like, I don't know, somebody fighting back against that empire, it's basically I don't know,
blown out of proportion.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of like, and we usually people should read our piece what we did with Rania Kalek, and actually, I think this is the piece we want to do. The second one, it's really, really short. Janet, the second one is the 1917 Slander and Facts. Okay. Exactly. It's like completely blown out of proportion. And then you're trying to explain, wait a minute, this cluster bomb like boils their skin alive and whatnot. And yep. And then it's like they don't have those proportions. And even like with history, they just clearly don't have those proportions. But with present, it's even for me, it's not hard because I just kind of like look through, like with New York Times, you don't have to like go through any special newspaper. You just have to keep track of what they say for about 6 months, and then you'll kind of get a pattern. But yep. That requires patience. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that's really happening today. And you can look at, you don't have to just look at Syria. I know that's what we've been talking a lot about, but you can look at really any country. It's like you might have like protesters. You can look at what's happened even here in the United States during the Black Lives Matter protests over the past year. You have brutal atrocities being committed against like innocent people in the street, black and brown people. And you have protesters who respond to that by going out and by and large peacefully protesting. And, then the police and the state crack down and, violate protesters' basic freedoms and basic rights and brutalize protesters. In some cases, kill protesters. Mm-hmm. And what does the media decide to focus on? Well, of course, the windows being broken in certain buildings by protesters. They don't focus on the atrocities of the state. They focus on some property damage by the protesters. And you can look at that and recognize that's the like status quo strategy of the mainstream media in the United States and all imperialist actors within media and political commentary and analysis. When you look at really any single war or intervention or regime change effort, the same logic applies. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have this second one pulled up here, Slander and Facts.
Yeah. So this is just like this is a very short piece, and basically it's kind of to explain how but what you should see is they behave a lot like the way they behaved against the Bolsheviks is exactly the same way they behave against Bernie Sanders, Jeremy Corbyn, Maduro, literally anyone to their left. It's kind of funny. So
cool. Well, Slander and Facts by V.I. Lenin, written on July 5th, 1970.
Okay. So what happened is that in 1918, after the revolution, they changed it to match with our calendar. But before then, the Russians used the Eastern Orthodox calendar. So I forgot which. Yeah. So this was probably on July 18th of our calendar and July 5th of their calendar. But then they still, so it's always.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So sometime in July of 1917, probably the 18th. Okay. Yeah. All right. An immense torrent of abuse and slander is being poured on the Bolsheviks for the demonstration of July 3rd and 4th. They go so far as to accuse the Bolsheviks of trying to seize the city, of wanting to, quote, violate the will of the Soviets, of, quote, encroaching on the authority of the Soviets, and so on and so forth. The facts, however, show that the Bolsheviks did not seize a single building, a single institution, let alone a section of the city, although they could have, nor tried to do so, even though the people were armed. This is such a perfect piece of text after what we were just talking about.
Exactly. That's why I picked it.
Yeah. The facts show that the only political act of violence against an institution occurred on the night of July 4th and 5th when the military cadets and the Cossacks wrecked Pravda on Polovets. How do you say that? Polosev's orders without the knowledge and against the will of the Soviet.
Okay, Pravda is the official newspaper of the Bolsheviks. So the Cossacks are kind of like death squads, and the Tsarist military wrecked. Actually, in fact, it was the Bolsheviks that faced the violence. But go on.
Yeah, and it's that directly relates to what we were just talking about with the Black Lives Matter protests. Same exact thing. So this is a fact. It was a deliberate, malicious use of force against an entire institution, an encroachment in violation, not in words, but in deeds. Had this encroachment been lawful, either the provisional government or the Soviet would have sanctioned the measure. Neither authority, however, did so. Those who committed violence against Pravda received no support either in the Soviet or in the provisional government. The Bolsheviks appealed to the soldiers who had started the demonstration to act peaceably and in an organized way. Neither the provisional government nor the Soviet appealed to the military cadets, the Cossacks, or the Polosvev to act peaceably and in an organized, lawful way. But we are told
this was really funny. Okay, because let me just remember about the officer involved shooting and bullet shoots people. Okay. Now go on.
But we are told there was shooting. Yes, there was. But who did the shooting? Who dares blame it on anyone without an investigation? Please listen to a witness from bourgeois quarters. This witness is the paper Burzvievi Vidomosti, evening edition of July 4th, a witness whom nobody in the world could suspect of partiality towards the Bolsheviks. Here's what the witness says, quote, at 2 p.m. sharp, when the armed demonstrators were passing the Sodavia and Nevsky corner.
Those are two streets in St. Petersburg.
Okay. And a large number of spectators were watching them quietly. A deafening shot rang out from the right side of Sadovaya, after which disorderly firing began. And so even the witness from the bourgeois paper is compelled to admit the truth, namely that the shooting began from the right side of Sadovaya. Surely this is a clear enough indication that the shooting was aimed at the demonstrators. Is it really so difficult to appreciate that if the demonstrators had planned or wished to use force, they would have sent people against a definite institution? As Politsev sent military cadets and Cossacks against Pravda, since sailors were killed, and since the witness from the bourgeois paper says that the shooting was started from the right side of Sodovaya when the armed demonstrators were passing, isn't this obvious enough proof that it was the Black Hundreds and the opponents of democracy, the quarters close to the cadets, that wanted or bent on violence?
Yep, this is always this way. I mean, I kid you not. Let me see if I can find this. Mm-hmm. But this one you're going to laugh at. This is like, I believe this was the Detroit Free Press in 1905. But let me just wait 1 second.
It's almost like you could just change those, the actors, the names out with like protesters and police today.
Okay, I found it. Okay. This is from 1905. But okay, I'm going to send it to Janet and see if she can share it. But this is hilarious because just pay careful attention. This is like exactly what you expect. You see it?
Oh my God! Yeah.
Machine gun frowns on Russian peace mobs.
Oh my God!
Yeah. So they basically machine gun down like during that event. They just machine gun down like 2,000 workers. But I like how the machine gun is. Oh my! It reminds me of how like when like the police like. I swear, LA Times once said like. Police bullet hits protester or something like that. And I'm like
yeah. And then the other part here where it's like Russian mobs. It's like these angry, violent protesters. They're the villains, not the ones who are, machine gunning them.
Exactly. And So it seems like there's a lot of it's not that hard to see through, but there's a lot of like spin that if people are not careful, it just kind of you can get confused. And they obviously do that because they expect people like they've been doing that back then, and they still do that now because they don't expect people to click past the headline. Like, do you have any suggestions for that?
Geez, I guess my suggestion would be to diversify the voices in the media that you're listening to, and obviously, as always, look at who is propping up the sources in the media that you're listening to, because for a lot of us, like independent voices, we don't have to appease the wishes of a advertiser or of a corporation. We don't have to do any of that stuff. And it's not to say that like our commentary is devoid of any sort of bias. I mean, it is bias, and it's just bias towards the truth.
Yeah.
So,
I always say the truth will lead you to Marx. Like if you're just like, yeah. I actually, when I started historically, I did not expect to be like a psycho tanky. But then the truth, like once you learn the truth and then you examine it deeper, you're like, oh my God, this is horrible.
Yeah.
Like, the deeper it goes, the more leftward the truth brings you.
Yeah, I mean, really, they're dealing with, just based on reading these, I've never read these documents that you prepared before, but like they're dealing with all the same stuff we're dealing with right now. It just repeats itself. You know, this is the same thing over and over and over. And now, unfortunately, in the United States, at least, and in a lot of Western countries, it's just like the propaganda is at such incredible levels and the system is too big to fail. And it almost seems like insurmountable, the levels of propaganda that we are currently witnessing. Fortunately, I do feel as though there are an increasing number, at least, of independent voices that are trying to make their way into the media. And the audiences are finding us, you know, they slowly but surely they are arriving at the truth.
That's what I'm hoping for, because yes, the propaganda is immense. And because we live in the imperial core, there's so much of like reality that there's enough people insulated who are comfortable enough. Like, I don't know how many you need, but there are just the right amount. That it's hard to get people more politically conscious. But for me, it's also very interesting to see how different channels evolve. For example, some of them become MSNBC light, and some of them actually stay principled. But it's and I've seen that, and I've seen both of it happen. So it's like something that we have to be constantly vigilant about. Like, yes. Is this misinformation? Is this true? How do they know it's true? And it takes a lot of work. It's like, and then it's easy to just spew off like articles you read from New York Times, but to see, are they consistent? Can they be verified? Is there a second source that can verify what they're saying here? Oh no. Okay. Let's just assume it's like that kind of stuff is hard. And I feel like we don't have the our education system does not teach us to do this. Like,
no.
And but you seem to have learned young. So like, what did you do differently?
I guess I was just to a certain extent, I was in the belly of the beast. Like a lot of people don't know, but I was actually a member of Nancy Pelosi's Youth Advisory Council.
Awesome. Do tell us about this. This is so cool.
We would have monthly meetings with her, and like it was me and 10 other kids. Uh-huh. And
were you guys all over California or just in
all over the nation? So I was the only one in California.
Wow. Okay.
And
how did you get selected?
My specific role on the council was to be an expert in like climate policy related things and environmental related things, because I'd done a lot of climate activism growing up. I had an environmental organization that was super successful. It was like a international one. And then I've worked a lot on national nuclear waste policy. Mm-hmm. So that was my focus. And then I was terminated from the group because I was one of the people who, when the Sunrise Movement was still very aggressive and active and actually pursuing bold policies, which I don't think it's that hard to see now that they've been co-opted. But I was arrested in Nancy Pelosi's office while I was on her advisory board for protesting for said, aggressive climate action policies. So kind of witnessing that was like not too long before I started my show, my YouTube show, witnessing that and showing that there's really no opportunity for reform within the Democratic Party or within these media institutions, and that we do have to work from the outside and create revolutionary third parties or revolutionary media that will be free of any sort of corporate control is what inspired me to I guess have no trust or faith in our current institutions.
Okay, that's very impressive. I had known about this because I did a cursory Google search on you and that did not pop up. But that's amazing. And it also gives you the gatekeeping of the centrist Democrats, and that they I don't know what they think the future is going to hold with regards to climate, because they have to know that the ocean's on fire. I don't what do you think is their plan? What are they thinking? I don't understand.
Their plan, I can tell it to you. Their plan is to continue to extrapolate profits from their absolutely terrible ideas to address the bare minimum issues surrounding climate change, right? Their idea is to do carbon credits and
what are carbon credits for people who aren't familiar?
So carbon credits are interesting. I actually used to work for a carbon credit company. So I've been in the belly of the beast and I've woken up to my ways. But carbon credits are this scam of a system that allow major corporations to continue to pollute the world without facing any sort of consequences. And basically, through international marketplaces, large corporations can, if they are limited in the amount of pollution that they can emit, be it carbon dioxide, be it methane, be it whatever. And if they surpass the limits that are set about by certain international accords or by a given country's limits that they have set themselves, then what these corporations can do is say, well, we're going to go over our limit this year. So to neutralize that, to combat our going over the limit that have been set about for, pollutants X, Y, or Z, we are going to buy carbon credits, which will then be used, the profits, or the money generated to buy carbon credits will be used to build solar panels in another country or wind energy production in another country. And these carbon credits will basically neutralize the amount of pollution that we went over in the limits that were set about by our country.
That sounds like corruption.
Yeah. It's basically a way for them to pay off the levels of pollution that they are emitting. But at the end of the day, a lot of these renewable projects that these carbon credit funds are supposed to be allocated to, they don't come to fruition. If they do come to fruition, it takes over a decade for them to even begin creation. So this whole thing is ridiculous. And then you on top of it, right? And when I was referring to the fact that politicians are benefiting from all of this, you can look down the line. Pelosi, the Bidens, they have an immense amount of stock in a lot of these companies that are they're like the carbon credit brokers, right? So it's just so corrupt. It's all a game to just make more money for these people, and it's really disgusting.
So they don't actually have a plan for when life becomes unlivable, right?
No.
Frightening. So it's up to we, the people. Okay.
Yeah,
so this is a very frightening reality, because I don't know how much time do you think we have between now and apocalypse, I guess. I mean, there's not going to be one apocalypse, but it'll be a slow moving.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends on where you're looking at. I mean, if you look in Syria, for example, Syria is already experiencing a lot of the firsthand ramifications of anthropogenic climate change. Countries that already have like very low amounts of resources, and they have those, limited resources because of U.S. and Western allied economic warfare that's been waged upon them, and in Syria's case, like a dirty war that's been propped up by the U.S. They are going to be the ones who are hit the hardest. The most disadvantaged people on the earth are going to be hit the hardest by this. But also, I mean, like in beautiful Orange County here, beautiful affluent Orange County, where I'm broadcasting from today, like. Just I can show you guys pictures of like the basketball court where I grew up learning how to play basketball with my dad sinking into the ocean because of the king tides that have overtaken it.
Wow.
It's just crazy what's happening here already. And fortunately, again, it's Orange County. We have the ability to rebuild these things because we do have resources. But when this stuff starts happening in countries that don't have the resources, again, those are going to be the people that get hit the hardest.
Wow. Okay. And what time? I know you have to go soon, but like, what time do you broadcast every day? And what's your like? What are your links? Where should people find you?
Yeah, so I stream on YouTube, Twitch, and Rockfin every day. Usually, I start streaming between like 4 and 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay,
and,
so it'll be like 6 and 8 p.m. our time. No.
Correct.
6
yeah.
and 7 and 9 p.m.
So Eastern Time would be that. And then if you just look up my name, Jackson Hinkle, or my show name, The Dive with Jackson Hinkle on YouTube or those other platforms, you'll find me there.
Okay. And do you have any future projects or anything else that that's like on the works that you want to tell people about?
I'm going to be having on Alex Rubenstein this week on my show
Alex.
to talk
He's
about.
One of my good friends.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to that. He's going to be talking about media censorship and he has
Business
been
Insider, like short-circuited him for his anti-Israel stance.
Yep, that. And then also this week, I'm going to be having on Caleb Maupin to talk about his new book, BreadTube Serves Imperialism.
Yeah, he sent me his book. I just haven't. Okay. The problem is that I'm still. Like for me, because I do historical things, like I actually have to finish reading everyone's book before I interview them. So I've like it's like book number 7 on my list. So have you read his book? What do you think?
I'm getting through it. I read through a good chunk of it last night. It's really good. It's really good.
Will I know who these people are?
What's that?
Well, okay, so I try not to know too many people on BreadTube. So will I know who all? Oh God, okay.
Honestly, he doesn't spend a lot of time focusing on like the individual streamers. More so it's like he's painting a broader context of like RedTube and why it's an issue. And that's why I think it's such a good read. So
okay, I'll start reading it as soon as I'm done with. So I have 2 books ahead of it. Like the one about. So I'm getting Dan Hicks about the British Museum, which is personally dear to my heart because everything from India is in the British Museum, and it's like, yeah, you guys need to. So he like tracks through the British Museum and shows like where everything belongs. So that's next cool. On my list. And then after that, it's this book about like, it's called Antarctica and how they quote unquote discovered Antarctica. So this one will be after that. So once I finish the British Museum book,
cool,
I'll get to his. But yeah, but then my interview with him will be delayed a little.
Yeah,
but thank you so much for coming, and please come again. And everyone, check out The Dive on YouTube, Twitch, and Rockfin.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. That was a really cool format, and I enjoyed that. And it's it just goes to show why reading Lenin is so important.
Thank you so much, and we should clip this as an advertisement.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, have a great rest of the day.
All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
The interview with Jackson was pre-recorded because it's kind of hard to get people to do it on what? left to the okay. Well, actually, don't say left or right. Should I move over on my phone hand or my not phone hand? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I have trouble with my lefts and rights, and it's annoying because when I'm trying to learn Russian, my Russian teacher seems to think that I know my rights and lefts in English. So he's like, "Slema is left," and I'm like, "Oh God, I have no idea which one's my left or my right because I still do phone hand and not phone hand, I guess, because it confuses the crap out of me." But we got some funny. Oh, no, I will do it. Okay, first we have some funny. We have a really funny comment that made both of us laugh, which will come up. Gani, yes, I will debunk the Vosh video about Belarus. If no one else has done it, has anyone else done it? If you guys can assure me that no one else has done it, I yes. If somebody else has done it, like watch that. Okay. So now what?
I said our comment is up, so
the comment is up. Great. And no, I can't see myself. Abhishek made a really funny comment when Jackson talked about his experience with Nancy Pelosi, and I had totally forgotten about Pelosi's luxury ice cream delivery. Anyways, by the way, while the stream was going on, somebody sent this like awesome highlight that Jackson did with Vosh. So let's just play that.
Okay, that's just gonna take me 1 second to grab.
Okay.
So hold on a second. Oh, what a pain in the butt. Okay, Hinkle Vosh. Okay, so sorry, it had a couple of seconds of blank screen in front of it.
Oh, no worries.
I was trying to do it really fast, and I didn't pull it to the end.
Does that make you wait? You actually want the video of like people
send
dying?
it to me because you said there was a video from showing a helicopter dropping something on. You didn't say it was chemical cylinders.
I can't prove claims I literally haven't seen made. Okay, you can't. You can go back and review the VOD if you want. You're free to clip it. That didn't happen. Okay, please listen to me and not to the voices in your head. That wasn't said.
Hold on a second.
Cool. We will just move on from that and accept.
Okay. Now you're back.
Okay. So Couch asked, are there any foreign policy buffs that I should follow? Well, I have one piece of advice. Don't follow anyone who calls themselves a foreign policy buff. That just means neocon. Actually, a few days ago, Benjamin Norton made a joke about anarcho-neocons. Anyways, do we have any other questions? I'm gonna try to make it more relevant, but the problem is like trying to read. It's a little harder. So then this week we're gonna have a new episode of the Historically podcast out. We're also going to have Wednesdays. This Wednesday, we're gonna continue on to the history of the CPSU, so Soviets Bolsheviks at 9 p.m. Actually, let's do it at 8:30 p.m. and we'll compress Monday night stream to Wednesday night stream. And then at 9 p.m. we'll continue with the history of the Soviet Union. And join us next week, and it'll be either Saturday or Friday for Late Nights with Lenin. And please like, subscribe, donate at historically.substack.com, and do all the good things you're supposed to do. Oh, and comment for the Al who likes to go rhythmic dancing.